Welcome back to the bench. We're moving into the critical weathering and painting stages of the Revell F-14A Tomcat. If you missed the assembly, catch up on the previous video. Today we focus on tonal density and naval-specific environmental wear. Visibility was an issue in several recessed areas, so I used a black Sharpie to establish a high contrast guide before laying down the initial panel lines with black paint. While this looks aggressive now, it serves as the skeleton for our tonal transitions. Perfection isn't the goal here. We're creating a controlled messiness that mimics the grime buildup found on high sortie airframes. To simulate the specific salt air corrosion typical of carrier-based birds, I've introduced a blue pre-shade. This creates a cool tonal subsurface layer that will interact with light gull gray topcoat. My reference for these patterns came directly from the kit's box, in addition to historical archives of the F-14A in videos and other Top Gun movie clips, using multiple sources to ensure the modeling isn't just random, but representative of real-world physics. I also found that when looking at the reference images, if I lowered their quality and created something called Gestalt grouping, which I had never heard of before, but basically making the images much lower resolution, it allowed me to see patterns that I could mimic between the various reference images that I could then copy onto this airframe. For the next stage, we want to lay down a coat of gold paint, and I used a rich gold here, in order to create a base layer for what will be many layers to form the engine. And then we're going to tape out the wing roots so that we can mark where there will be grime from the wings opening and closing against the protection bags for that mechanism. We're going to tape that off with Tamiya masking tape and then brush that in, and we'll work on this several times until I get it to look exactly the way that I want. I'm creating a grime effect here using powdered weathering material and a light brush, and I'm just brushing that over, creating again what mimics the patterns that I saw in reference images. I have some mineral spirits on this brush, and I'm using a Q-tip in addition to create very specific streak marks where the bags might be grabbing just a little bit more on the wing. It looks a little extra right now, but I will blend that back in with a brush, as you see here. And I just keep blending and blending until I get it to look like the reference images that I was going for. In this particular case, it is pretty dark, and that is my intent. I'm going for a very grimy, very well-worn carrier aircraft. Here we're using oil weathering techniques, which I cover in other videos. Basically, we're just going to put some oil paint on a piece of cardboard, let it set for at least 4 hours. Then we're going to mix that with some mineral spirits, let it dry, or excuse me, put it on the model, let it dry on the model, and then come back with a brush to clean it up with, again, some mineral spirits. And here I am spreading that out with a little bit of extra mineral spirits on my brush to create streaks in the particular areas that I'm going for. And I've sped this up, as you can see. And again, as we remove the masking tape, it's all about blending, using the brush palette to blend, the mineral spirits. You just got to keep working with the model to create the patterns that you see in your reference images. This was an amazing reference video that my partner Denise shot when she was on a road trip with her father. She actually happened to stop at an aircraft carrier, and they had an F-14 on the flight deck. So she captured this video footage for me on her iPhone, and it allowed me to create determine what the wear patterns would look like on the various engines. So again, we used a gold base coat, coming back with some Tamiya clear blue, and then we will also add some rust effects and some black streaking grime to that as well to create the final look. One learning experience here, I painted blue, transparent blue, over the entire surface. If I were telling somebody else how to do this, I would have them make that blue just slightly more random. I'm very happy with the way it turned out. I wanted that very much blued metal look, and that's exactly what I got. But as I studied the video and the reference images after the fact further, I did find that I would have liked a little bit more randomness, but I was very happy with the outcome, so it wasn't worth me going back to change. Just something that I will definitely incorporate into a future build. Here we can see the soot build up inside the engine after its many hours of use, and we're going to mimic that by dry brushing inside the engine. I really am thankful for this video from Denise. She was really great taking this video for me and sending it to me. So we're just going to dry brush that on the inside to create that soot look. And I had previously painted in the prior video the inside to get that red pink look that you get from having an engine exposed to the jet fuel ash and afterburners and all of the other things that cause the weathering patterns of the jet engines. Here we're putting some final touch-ups on the engine before we apply some streaking grime. This rust grime will help mimic the brown streaks that you saw on the reference video. This turns out quite well. I definitely applied that more randomly and it looked quite nice in the end, as you'll see with the final high resolution images at the end. While all of that's curing, we're going to go ahead and work on the missiles. And these had quite a few gaps. This is a kit that has some challenges, so we just have to work with those challenges. The Vallejo water-based putty works quite well. We can apply that, use silicone tools to kind of move things around and get them into the right place, and then I come back with a wet Q-tip to clean them up, which fills the gaps quite nicely. And in the end, these missiles end up looking pretty darn nice. This was, I think I spent $27 on this kit total. Very happy with the results for the price that I paid. I definitely think this is a kit that is good for people to learn on. Here we're coming back with some leveling paint, and we're going to go ahead and fill the gaps that were not covered with the putty, that are basically too small to use putty with. And we're going to brush that in, let that smooth and flow out, give it ample time to dry before we go ahead and paint the missile its final color. Once that's been completed, we're ready to paint the missiles with a light gold gray. And here you'll see something interesting happen. You'll notice that the paint is not adhering to the missile correctly and the missile mounting assembly. That indicates that I didn't get that part cleaned as well. So we're just going to solve that by spraying some alcohol onto a paper towel, and we will just wipe that down. And the part that I painted incorrectly, I'll go ahead and wipe that down as well. The alcohol won't damage any of the primer that I had used earlier. And as you can see, after wiping that down with alcohol, the paint lays down quite smooth and works quite well. Growing up, I really had a bit of an obsession with these Phoenix missiles. I thought they were pretty darn cool. I'm not really sure why, other than the fact that they seemed really powerful, at least for back as an 80s kid. They just seemed pretty cool. Here we're getting ready to paint out the nose cone, and we're going to use a flat white paint for that. Just using the trusty Iwata Eclipse airbrush. This airbrush works great for most model activities that I've worked with. It is relatively inexpensive and just really is a pretty good quality brush that is cheap enough to buy parts for if you need them. And I've used the heck out of this brush for sure. Following reference images, we're going to use natural steel to paint the wing assemblies and various other steel aspects of the Sidewinder and Sparrow missiles. I've viewed quite a few reference images. There's a lot of variations in these missiles, and I built these based off of the F-14A time period Sidewinder and Sparrow missiles. Be sure to leave a comment if you've built this plane before. I would love to hear about your experience. If this was a rite of passage when you were a kid, or if you've built it as an adult. But again, I picked this up for about $27 at the hobby store on clearance. And if I were a kid, I would have learned a lot from building this plane. Even as an adult, I've learned a fair bit from building this plane, or at least it refreshed some techniques that I kind of had forgotten since I was a kid. and it was definitely a lot of fun to build. Now we're ready to paint the yellow lines that indicate that this has a live warhead. And we will also paint the maroon colored lines that indicates where the rocket motor goes inside of the missile frame. One piece of advice I would offer those new to modeling is invest in some quality masking tape. There is a substantial difference between cheap masking tape and something like this Tamiya masking tape. This stuff is just ideal for modeling. They make various widths. It really, really is a game changer. Here we are putting many, many coats of yellow paint onto this. You can paint pink or white first to speed this up, but this paint actually is one of the better yellows that I've worked with. So when I say many coats, I think it's 2 or 3. I might have saved myself a coat if I would have painted it pink first, but I was pretty happy with the outcome, so I wasn't too worried about it. I started off painting these rocket engine lines with a traditional modeling brush. And as I worked on the models, oh, look at there, it's Ben's, one of our kitty cats. We originally were going to call this channel Fur Buddy Builds because I frequently get visited by our furry friends. And this is one that is rare to the bench. So make sure to comment and let me know what you thought of Mr. Ben's. Anyway, back to the painting of the missiles. You'll notice that in that last shot there that the maroon lines weren't really all that precise. And I was served up an ad on Amazon, of all things, for nail art brushes, and I went ahead and invested in those for I think a whole $8 or $9. And as you'll see from this shot here, the lines are much straighter and much nicer. So I had repainted those with those nail art brushes by hand without any masking, and I was very happy with those. So I will definitely have those in my arsenal going forward, and I may do a little video kind of showing those brushes off at some point in time in the future, but definitely worth the investment. Now that the Phoenix missiles are glued on, I think it's starting to look pretty good. And I just remembered why the Phoenix missiles were so cool as a kid, and it's because I had a model rocket, an Estes model rocket that I built that was a Phoenix missile, and that's why, because that missile or that rocket was a lot of fun to shoot off. At least I believe it was an Estes model rocket. That was a lot of fun. Here I'm using a combination of modeling glue, Tamiya extra thin cement, and CA glue to hold this on because of the geometry of how this particular piece attaches to the aircraft. I needed it to be permanently adhered with the Tamiya extra thin, but I also wanted to not have to hold it for the amount of time it takes that to set up, and the CA glue provides a fast solution to that. Now that we've got that assembled, we need to blend the weathering in to match the rest of the plane. And for that, we'll just use our dry weathering powder and this application brush to make it look the same as the rest of the airframe. And here is the nail art brush. And as you can see, it lays down a beautifully fine line. It works quite well with all of the variety of model paints that I've used with it so far. And I'm very, very happy with it. Definitely recommend spending the $8 or $9 it costs to get a set of those. And they have various lengths too, which is pretty nice. Now we're going to use a medium gray to paint the nose cone because this, at least in my reference images, always looked very clean, regardless of the rest of the corrosion on the aircraft. So we're going to go ahead and lay down a fresh coat of that and make that look nice and flat. And I presume that's because it was accessed all the time for radar maintenance and whatnot. Laying down some of the decals, and this, like any modern jet, has an insane number of nose steps, so just be prepared for that. As you can see, quite a few nose steps in this shot here as we lay down the classic 114. Then we follow up with the ruler to ensure that we have that spaced correctly. Once we have all the decals on, we're going to lock everything in with a coat of ultra flat varnish. It's kind of like my last step. And then here we are with the final images. Appreciate your time watching this. Definitely would appreciate any comments that you have on the video. Definitely would also appreciate likes and subscribes as well. This helps a small channel like mine grow, and definitely keeps me doing the stuff that I'm doing. So I appreciate your time, and I hope that you have a blessed day.